Principal. That's my other hat. I'm the president of the Military History Society of New South Wales. Welcome everybody to our monthly lecture. And this morning I've got the privilege of announcing our speaker, Dr. Mesut. Mesut has been a loyal friend of the Society. He comes to all our lectures and we've had him speak to us on numerous topics around World War I and in particular in the Middle East. So this morning he's presenting a topic that you might be familiar with, and that's the Battle of Beersheba, but from a different perspective. So I know I'm very curious to see what that perspective is and give me another insight into the battle itself. So now that we're starting a bit late, I won't hold you any longer. Put our hands together and welcome Dr. Mesut.
Very good to see a fully loaded salon. Please pay attention to the title. This is the real title, not the one distributed by the one. We prefer a more juicy title. Okay, let's start. I'm a military historian, specialized on late Ottoman and modern Turkish military history. So I never dream about talking about the British soldiers, territorials, or the yeomanry. But I notice some conflicting issues, and by the way, I am not a historian fond of counterfactuals, what ifs, might have beens, things happen that way. So as historians, it is our duty to present what had happened, why, how, and all the other details. So counterfactuals, generally the topic of the fiction authors or literatures, let's say. And while writing a book about the Gaza battles, as you know, there are 3 different Gaza battles in 1917, and my book will be released hopefully pretty soon in May or June, but we are yet to have the cover. Anyway, while conducting research about the Gaza battles from the perspective of the Ottomans, the Turks, I find out some of the missing items within the English written literature. I'm very much surprised that the role of the 20th Army Corps, including 2 divisions, 60th London Division and 74th Yeomanry Divisions, mostly neglected, forgotten, and people not showing any interest about what they did during the Beersheba battle. As you know, there's already a legend of the light horse. I am not specifically against the legends. All legends provide you a kernel of truth. All legends born out of the historical facts, and all legends serve to certain purposes. If we have a light horse legend related with Beersheba, that means it is serving to different purposes in Australian society. So I am not against about that. And as you know, there are so many books about the light horse charge, Beersheba. I just listed some of the historical ones. There are also novels, storybooks, and of course memoirs. The interesting thing is the subject matter is so popular that we have newcomers, starting with the centenary of the Beersheba battle 2017. Israel is within this topic. The Prime Minister of Israel openly said that the Jews and Australians fought against the Turks at Beersheba. That was, how can I say, a very big lie. The only Jews that fought at Beersheba were wearing Ottoman uniforms.
Really?
Because Ottoman Empire was multinational, and some of the future leaders of the Israel, including Moshe Sharet, was an officer within the Ottoman Empire. He graduated from law faculty in Istanbul. So, no matter what the reasons behind this issue, Beersheba is very popular in Australia, in New Zealand, and nowadays in Israel also. But the funny thing is, there is almost no interest about the 20th British Army Corps. It is Commander Philip Chatwood. Actually, he was the one who prepared and designed the Beersheba offensive. He was the one who advised that there is a need not to attack the Gaza again, but let us find a flanking offensive using Beersheba. And there may be several reasons behind that. As most of you know, the British territorials at that time in 1970 had a terrible reputation because they were the ones who lost the first Gaza battle and the second Gaza battle. Most of the territorials fighting in the Middle East labeled as lesser territorials or surplus territorials, secondary territorials. That means the ones who were not conscripted at the beginning for various reasons, including the physical issues or disease, illnesses, etc. They were later on enrolled into the military, created completely new units with very problematic officers, including the generals. So they were treated harshly in military history literature. If you take a look at any books describing the first Gaza battle, the second Gaza battle, you will come across lots of nasty phrases about the British territorials or the British yeomanry. The British yeomanry treated so bad that the generals decided to pull the horses from them and transform them into an infantry division. That is the name of the 74th Division. And right now, the British public try to stay away as much as they can from the Middle East. Because there's a kind of a feeling that what is going on in the Middle East between the Palestinians and Israelis automatically related with the British policy during and after the First World War. So they are very happy to forget about everything related with the Palestine campaign, the British soldiers, their ancestors that fought that. And if you try to find anything related with Gaza or the other battles, the battles that you will find are the modern ones, not the one happened more than 100 years ago. Okay, first of all, we should not forget that the Palestine campaign, the Gaza battles, the Beersheba battle, were part of a global war. And it was not the main effort, the main front located in France, in Belgium. It's a side front. Some of the historians or popular authors would like to paint it as Oriental sideshow. It is not that small. It consumed lots of soldiers, military sources, and it diverted important military assets from the main front. So the British, for various reasons, including imperialism, decided to commit important military assets far away from France. And we should not forget that Beersheba battle was linked to previous two Gaza battles. So there were three Gaza battles, and Beersheba happened as a part of the third Gaza battle. So it is, the real name of Beersheba battle is Third Gaza Beersheba battle. The first two battles ended in terrible defeats. The British general in charge of the offensive, Murray, preferred not to go to the battlefield, delegated authority to his corps commanders, and guess what? His corps commanders decided to delegate authority to their division commanders, and in the end, they created a mess. Under normal conditions, the British Expeditionary Force had the numbers, weapons to roll over the Ottoman defense in every case, under normal conditions. But thanks to Archibald Murray and others, some problematic British generals, they managed to create a defeat out of victory in both cases. And at the end of the second Gaza battle, in which Murray was sent back to London, there was an impasse. It was not a military impasse, it was a problem with the mindset. The British generals faced a serious issue. After two attacks, they didn't have the courage to force Gaza once again. So they were looking somewhere else to launch the new attack. And all of a sudden, they discovered Beersheba. Why Beersheba? Okay, the ones literate in Bible will remember that Beersheba is an important biblical town, famous because of the wells. Okay, Beersheba or Beersheba in Arabic means 7 wells. So in a desert geography, topography, wells are valuable, and what makes Beersheba attractive for the British was the wells, water. And Philip Chatwood prepared a plan. This time, the main offensive would not take place against the Gaza. First, the main offensive would target Beersheba. And Philip Chatwood, during the previous stages of the campaign, he was in charge of the cavalry, including the light horse. So he wanted to make use of the cavalry light horse he had. His plan is very similar to the military operations in Sinai Peninsula. The light horse, mounted infantry, enveloped isolated Ottoman military posts in Sinai Peninsula, including Rafah, Mektebe, etc. So his plan was just repeating some of the successful cavalry actions against Beersheba, because he knew that the Ottomans did not have enough forces there. The Ottoman defense was open in the air on the south. They didn't create an encircled fortification. He knew that if he launched a flanking attack from the south, he would be able to isolate the Ottoman garrison and capture the Beersheba and the wells intact. But there is one problem. Okay, in this slide you see that it shows you can reach from Beersheba to Jerusalem. But in reality that is not possible. Because of the terrain, big units cannot move from Beersheba to Jerusalem. Of course, right now there is a big Autobahn connecting Jerusalem and Beersheba, but back in the day that was not the case. an infantry regiment can march to Jerusalem, but an army corps could not at that time. So that was the problem of the Beersheba plan. After capturing Beersheba, the attacking units must turn to the northwest, roll out the Ottoman defense, reach Gaza and capture Gaza. Because in order to reach Jerusalem, you need to capture Gaza, follow the coastal road to a certain interval, and then turn to the interior against Jerusalem. And that was one of the criticisms within the British channels. Some of them said that this is idiotic. Why not attack Gaza again with all our forces? We can easily destroy the Gaza, capture it without spending any time with Beersheba. But politically that was not possible. No general, including Allenby, had the courage to say to the political leaders that I will attack Gaza again. But guess what? After capturing Beersheba, Allenby attacked Gaza again. But no political leaders paid any attention about it, and right now we are watching how the political leaders leading a war in Iran. So I think the same is working out again. The generals still having difficulty to say the military realities to their political leaders and cover it with sugar or chocolate, present it like that. So Chatwood's plan looks impressive, but in reality it's a camouflage version of attacking Gaza again. Okay, Allenby, when he took over the leadership of the expeditionary force from Murray, he found that Chatwood already prepared a plan and he was very happy with it. But as a newcomer, he exaggerated the Ottoman strength in Beersheba. On paper, there was an Ottoman army corps defending Beersheba. On paper, that army corps should have between 25,000 to 30,000 soldiers on paper. But in reality, the Ottoman Third Army Corps that is defending Beersheba was a weak division, 4,400 combatant soldiers. Okay, that is a bit more than a regular regiment. At that time, a regiment had the manpower of 3,000. An ordinary infantry division had the manpower of 10,000. So although the Ottoman defenders at Beersheba labeled as an army corps, it was actually a weak division. Okay, let me return back to the table. That was the amount of the infantry and firepower Allenby allocated. Okay, that's a bit too much. It is like using a huge hammer to kill a single ant. And allocating that amount of soldiers would create problem for the Chatwood later on. Okay, why the Ottomans decided to defend Beersheba? The Ottoman army was under the command of a German general, Kress von Kress-Stein, and von Kress would like to evacuate Beersheba several times because he knew that he needed the troops at the real location of defense in Gaza. But his higher-ups, the military leaders and political leaders refused because Beersheba transformed into an important logistical depot. There were lots of facilities there, including some manufacturing sites. Additionally, Beersheba protecting the farm fields that are ready for harvest. So the Ottoman plan was to evacuate Beersheba 1 month later. after the end of the harvest. They were already dismantling the important facilities, transporting them inside the Palestine. And of course, there's the factor of prestige. The Ottomans invested a lot of money, a lot of effort to Beersheba, and they did not want to evacuate Beersheba without fighting. So, von Kress asked the Army Corps commanders, İsmet Bey, saying that, okay, this is defense of Beersheba would be useless, gain time, show some resistance, but destroy the water sources before evacuating. So that was the most important task of the Army Corps commander in Beersheba, destroying the water sources. Because without water, Beersheba was useless. The Ottoman defense system was modern. They benefited a lot from their experience in Gallipoli, but also the German experiences at the Western Front. They translated lots of German manuals, training circulars, and they made use of the modern defense template. But there's one problem. The Ottomans did not have enough fortification material. So they dig up their defense position in desert, and as you know, because of the sand, the loose material, you need to reinforce that fortification with sandbags and, if possible, with cement. But the Ottomans did not have the capacity to create bunkers, machine gun nests from concrete. Although they created marvelous defense line, this defense line very vulnerable against the artillery. For 2 months, the British Expeditionary Force spent a lot of energy and money to create a logistical line to transport the light horse and British infantry to Beersheba, to provide enough food, to provide enough water. Unlike the Ottomans, the British soldiers and the British horses, unable to drink water from the local sources. The local water brackish, you need to get used to it. So all the British soldiers and horses consuming water coming from the river Nile. And that is one of the logistical nightmare of the issue. Even the horses prefer not to drink the local waters. Okay, so this was the plan of the attack of the British 20th Army Corps. The 20th Army Corps had 3 divisions plus cavalry. Instead of using 3 divisions against the Beersheba, because that would be impossible, you would have so many infantry soldiers on a very narrow front. Chatwood had to allocate 1 division, 53rd, fix in position in further rest. He decided to make use of his cavalry into a combat group, Smith's group. He put them on the north, waiting to exploit the success after the end of the infantry offensive. So the 74th Division on the north and the 60th London Division at the south would carry out the main offensive. The offensive started with artillery preparation fires. At 5:55 early in the morning, the British artillery started to fire 320 guns. 320 guns on a narrow front, firing nearly 4 shells or 5 shells per minute. They fired for 1 hour. And in the end, when they stopped firing, the British generals got horrified that everywhere covered with thick dust. Nothing to see, completely blind. So they had to wait 1 hour so that the dust settled down. And at the end, when the dust settled down, they found out that all the barbed wire standing still. None of them cut down. So they had to send pioneers, combat engineers to the front to cut the wire, and all the infantry waiting. But luckily, all the Ottoman defense side already evaporated. 1 hour of 320 artillery guns firing to the desert. What do you expect? All the defense line disappeared. But still, they didn't feel secure enough. Before the launch of the attack, they asked for additional artillery fire. So 10 minutes intensive artillery fire, and the British infantry launched their offensive within a thick cloud of dust. Okay, there was another problem in addition to overusing the artillery fire. Philip Chetwood was fearful that the artillery fire might damage the water sources that they should supposed to capture. So he severely limited the artillery fires beyond a certain point. And when the British infantry started attacking, they discovered that the Ottoman artillery beyond the restriction zone all safe and started firing to the British infantry. And that was the reason why the British infantry suffered casualties more than the Australians. They couldn't suppress the Ottoman artillery because of the strict limitations. At 8:30, the British frontal attack started. At the first line, they couldn't find anybody. The Ottoman soldiers either killed it or buried under the sand. They suffered casualties because of the artillery fire, because of the machine gun fire located in the interior. And during this period, because of the artillery fire, because of the British infantry offensive, the Ottoman commander Ismet Bey had to send the reserve regiment to this area. So in the end, when the British offensive stopped at 1300 hours, 3.5 regiments of the 5 Ottoman regiments in Beersheba already destroyed. It was destroyed mostly thanks to the immense artillery fire, and the leftovers was destroyed by the British infantry, either killed it or captured. And at that moment, Chetwood stopped his British infantry, because according to the plan, their role was secondary. Chetwood himself prepared a wonderful plan for light horse cavalry. He didn't want to destroy his plan, so British infantry stopped. They decided to move some forces to the north to deal with some of the Ottoman defenses away from the main area. And guess what? All the British soldiers started to build up tents. They started to collect souvenirs for their loved ones in Britain. All of them disintegrated on the battlefield, so all the organizations of the units lost. And we are still waiting for the Australian and New Zealand light horse and mounted infantry to launch their attack. Okay, what is happening on the other side? So according to the plan, the Australians and New Zealanders, with some British, should launch the attack early in the morning, around 8 to 9 o'clock. They did launch their attack, and they discovered that the Ottoman eastern side, there were some Ottoman positions with some Ottoman machine guns, and when the cavalry showed their presence, the Ottoman commander İsmet Bey sent some units and his cavalry to cover the area being targeted by the Australians and New Zealanders, especially the hill Tel El Sabah. Later on in 1970s, they discovered that this hill was artificial, belonging to an ancient civilization, but at that time nobody knew about it. Tel El Sabah transformed into the main blocking place for the Australian and New Zealander attacks. They spent too much time, too much energy, and at the end, General Chauvel, in charge of the Desert Corps, started to speculate whether it is logical to stop the attack and wait for the next day. Okay, the British infantry on the other side just enjoying the sun, collecting souvenirs. So Chauvel decided to ask Chatwood, would it be possible for you to launch an offensive from your position? And Chatwood said, sorry mate, no, because all the units disintegrated. So that is one of the funniest sights. At 1300 hours, the British infantry had all the means just to roll towards the Beersheba town center to the water sources, and they were just 1 kilometer away. But because nobody ordered them to do that, and because the soldiers like us, when you left them unattended, they would simply transform into tourists, taking photos, collecting things, enjoying time, and started talking about the heroics they showed. So they created a problem because they had abundance of soldiers. They had abundance of opportunities, and they got stuck into a last-minute heroics of the light horse. So in the end, I would not cover that. The light horse launched a brave offensive, captured the town, and captured most of the water sources intact. Because the Ottoman commander İsmet Bey neglected at the last minute not to destroy the water sources, because he believed that, taking into account of the offensive, he might able to hold on Beersheba, and he didn't want to destroy the water sources early. When he gave the order, okay, destroy the water sources, they couldn't find the combat engineer company in charge of destruction, because somebody, some staff officer, decided to send the engineers as a foot infantry to the front line. So they hurriedly tried to destroy the water sources with ordinary officers and NCOs, and in the end they couldn't destroy it properly. So most of the water sources captured intact, but you know what? The amount of water turned out to be not enough for the horses. They had to carry water from the Nile to provide more waters, and that was the reason why the light horse had to wait 3 or 4 days to start its offensive against the Ottoman defense line towards the Gaza. Okay, let's take numbers. Okay, you know, the body count is a terrible term thanks to the Americans in Vietnam. But as military historians, we need to make use of the numbers. How many soldiers participate in the battle? How many casualties suffered? The number of the guns, the number of the ammunition spent, etc. If you take a look at the numbers in terms of dead and wounded, the British territorials and yeomanry suffered more than the Australians and the New Zealanders. Why is that? 1,100 wounded. That is because of the shrapnel of the Ottoman guns. They put severe restrictions. They couldn't destroy the artillery. When infantry launched the attack, they came under the artillery fires, and that was the reason of the number of the casualties so high. However, if you visit Beersheba, except the cemetery, and pay attention, that cemetery, they have more than 1,000 graves, because they collected all the separate cemeteries into one. So not all the graves in Beersheba belong to the soldiers killed in action in Beersheba. It's a main cemetery collecting all the small cemeteries. There is a monument for, of course, the lighthouse. There is a monument for Turkish defenders, but there is nothing for the British. If you're really keen to find the monument for the 60th London Division, you need to go to Jerusalem. They have their monument in Jerusalem because, out of pure luck, the Jerusalem mayor surrendered to the 60th Division. So with some policemen, the mayor with a white flag trying to find British soldiers. So he happened to come across 60th Division soldiers, and out of pure luck, the 60th Division took over the surrender of the Jerusalem, and that is why they have a monument in Jerusalem, but no monuments in Beersheba. If you would like to read more about the contribution of British territorials and yeomanry, I would advise these two old books written by the actual veterans. These are some kind of semi-official divisional histories, and these are the only sources available, and you can easily download from internet, from archive or website. And that is the end of my presentation.
We've got some time for questions. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mesut. I'm Paul Simmons. The artillery preparation seems to have been very late. Was there any thought to actually prepare the battlefield earlier with a building artillery campaign fire? Why did they wait?
Well, the issue is logistics. I mean, there's water in Beersheba, but all the other places there's none. And the available water in some of the wells are so brackish that the British soldiers, even the horses, are unable to drink. So they had to make the preparations accordingly. It took huge effort to transport so many soldiers, and don't forget the number of the logistical support units. So the amount of water needed in front of Beersheba was huge. And because Allenby, thinking about Western Front calculations, decided to send so many guns, so many ammunition, so many soldiers, he made the situation more complex. I mean, his intelligence guys already provided him information that an Ottoman division means less than 3,000 soldiers, an Ottoman army corps less than 10,000, but he simply did not believe his intelligence advice and thought about 25,000 Ottoman soldiers defending with everything, including the guns, fortification, etc. And Because of that, he invested so many soldiers, so many guns, and this created its own problem. I mean, think about sending an army corps with 3 divisions, and the corps commander, the one who actually prepared the plan, discovered that he couldn't able to use 3 divisions at once, and he decided to move 1 division to a non-essential duty because of overcrowding. So the main problem with Beersheba was having so much on the field, and because you have so much, you got into difficulty how to make use of them properly. And in the end, you have to depend upon the bravery of 2 regiments to do the impossible at the last moment. And because of that, Beersheba ended as a victory. On the other case, if they waited for the night and start the attack again in the morning, there would be no water sources to capture. And that would cause many horses to die.
Rob, just a comment. The 60-pounder guns that the British had as their heavy artillery could only be moved into position by steam tractors, and that consumed a hell of a lot of water in itself.
It seems that the British infantry, the 20 Corps, went, well, just stop. Why wasn't the Corps pushed from the high command and keep going?
That is because of the Commanding General Chatwood. Because Chatwood prepared the plan for the cavalry and wanted flanking action. So although at 1300 hours he had all the opportunity to walk directly to the city centers, he preferred not to do that because of his wonderful plan. He paid no attention of the difficulties General Chauvel facing, and when he got direct requests from Chauvel, please help us, he couldn't because all his infantry in a resting mode. He needed to collect them again, put them into order, and he couldn't do that. I mean, think about thousands of soldiers walking all around. Nobody knows who they are. They are just hunting souvenirs, having photos taken, enjoying the successful action, and saying that we are alive. We achieved something marvelous. How can you put them in organization and say them, okay, let us march again?
You started to talk by explaining the role of mythology played. The whole talk, you hardly mentioned the Australians at all. But how did the mythology develop, arrive, given the story you told? How did the mythology about the Australian island come about? And why?
Well, first of all, the Australia at that time was hungry for military achievements. There was a wide-scale understanding that in order to become a nation, you need to shed blood, you need to have some heroics, military glory. There was already a hunger in Australia for any small achievements, even if it is small, and people are ready for it. Second, you have the wonderful combination of man and horse together. So having horse and man in a modern world, something so important that is one of the attractions of Beersheba nowadays. The third, we are talking about Bible. The battle is taking place in a biblical place, Beersheba. So the Beersheba has all the necessary ingredients to be popular in Australia. And if you pay attention to current fans of Beersheba, you will find the most important attraction is the horse. I mean, nowadays they are still shooting documentaries about the war horses. An individual horse, a group of horses, all horses, how they valiantly fought for the Australian ideals in Palestine. It's a hugely attractive issue, and everybody, even the ones who are completely against military stories about wars, very happy to watch sentimental, romantic documentaries of the valor and friendship of horses.
Might just make a comment which might be useful to people. The logistic tail of the two-division Desert Mounted Corps was 10 kilometres long, nose to tail. And that was just to support two White Horse divisions, 10 kilometres long. And a lot of that was trackers moving at 8 kilometres an hour.
When we learn tactics, we always learn that the attacker needs an advantage over a retrenched defender of 3 to 1. Yet here, the advantage was about 8 to 1, and it was a near-run thing. To me, what it says is that the Turks, the Ottoman defenders, did one hell of a job because they really made the British Commonwealth forces pay a very high price for what should have really, as you say, been a walkover.
Well, the issue is why the Ottoman Corps Commander İsmet Bey made series of poor choices, because he still couldn't understand why so many infantry and cavalry he was facing, because he thought that this is a minor place, not very important exactly water sources, and he couldn't figure it out. I mean, he was a very smart staff officer, and he later on became the president of Turkey after Atatürk, the second president of Turkey. So he was a very successful guy, but he made lots of mistakes because he simply couldn't understand what is going on. I mean, it was like a dream. So many infantry, so many cavalry attacking Beersheba. Why?
Just a couple of points. The reason why the British infantry didn't go in Beersheba is because their orders specifically stated that they were, I would say, seize their initial objectives. They weren't to advance past what was called the blue line, which was a limit of exploitation. And the charge wasn't actually supposed to take place. Chauvel spent a lot of time trying to take Tel El Sabah. In the end, he had a whole light horse division up on that hill. And when you've been there, it's not that big. So the Turkish defenders did very well to suck in a lot of Australian interest. So by the time they actually Tel El Sabah fell, Chauvel, sitting up on his hill, had already had to make a decision. He had to take Beersheba by the end of the day. That was in the orders as well, that they had to seize Beersheba by last light or by daytime, by night time. So with the Australian Anzac Division taking so long up on Tel El Sabah, he committed the 4th Light Horse Brigade from the Australian Mounted Division to charge because that was the only way he was going to get
Well,
into Beersheba.
actually he didn't. His generals asked him to do that. They desperately pleaded him, please let us do it.
Sure.
I mean, Chauvel at the last one said that, okay, let's wait, play it safe. He had abundance of sources, so Beersheba could wait.
And the other thing is, if the British infantry had kept going, if they had got bogged down, that would have given the Ottomans plenty of time to perhaps destroy all the wells.
Well, there's no chances to get bogged down because it is plain field, no defense line, the Ottoman reserve already destroyed. There was nobody to stop them other some logistical elements inside the town, rallying to defend some of the buildings. I mean, they had abundance of opportunities. It was just a walkover. It would not be a real military offensive or real making use of the success.
I have just 2 more.
The bit that you mentioned there about when the moving the light horse, they made a big deal about the necessity in making the attack. then you made a mention that the British thought they could have waited till the following morning. So did that infer that they could have waited the following morning, but there wasn't necessary life or death in the charge?
Yeah, but there will be no water sources to drink. All of them would be destroyed during the night time.
Right. So the movie was correct. The British thinking that might have been an alternative, really wasn't an alternative.
Well, to say the British is not correct, let's say the commanding general. That is the issue of the Chatwood and Chauvel. So Chatwood, as the officer who prepared the plan, he wanted his plan to succeed. So he was more than ready to stop the British infantry, provide the glory to the Australians and New Zealanders. I mean, think about that. The British infantry advancing, capturing Beersheba, and I will not be talking about it here.
Doctor, thank you very much. It seems to me that this is once again an example of a victory despite the best efforts of generals. The question I ask, there's two questions. Firstly, I can sympathise with the Turkish commander not wanting to destroy all of the wells, because he also had several thousand people to feed water to in the middle of nowhere. But finally, the last point I make is there any evidence that there was a decent reconnaissance done of Beersheba from the Allied side?
Well, if you take a look at the intelligence reports, they spend a lot of energy and sources to get a good picture of Beersheba, and they did get a good picture of Beersheba, but I mean, you will see this issue appearing again and again during the whole First World War, regardless of the front line. The British most often had the accurate picture of the enemy, but still, in order to play safe, they committed more than enough sources, and because of committing so many sources, they got entangled with it. I mean, think about it. Would you send more than 25,000 soldiers in such a long desert way to Beersheba against a bit more than 3,000 Ottoman soldiers? That is ridiculous. Would you send 300 plus cannons with all their ammunition, with tractors, etc., to Beersheba in order to create one of the largest sand cloud ever created in Beersheba? I mean, you can still visit the defense line. It is not currently under constructed. Most of the other fields constructed by the Israelis, but the main defense line is still out there in the desert, and you will still able to see how foolish to bombard that area for more than 1 hour. I mean, no military guy with sane mind would do that, but they did. I mean, that is why numbers are important. When you play up the numbers, you will get a better understanding of the mentality at that time.
Thank you.
Well, can we put our hands together for